What's up guys, FFM Azure here with my whip tutorial slash guide on improving your whips. And I'm under the assumption that if you're watching this, you already know how to whip, but maybe you have a bit of trouble combining them. Maybe you have a bit of trouble doing whips outside of the conventional hand over or underhand whips. So what I'm going to do is to help you expand, to help you branch out, and to help you make your whips your own, and to maybe give you some tips fundamentally, because some people, I think, get really frustrated when they see someone who can whip very, very well, and then they see someone, or then they try it themselves, and they find that they can't do it, so they either go too fast to try and compensate, or they don't focus on the form. They focus on the speed and trails, which I agree are very pretty, and that's why I like whipping, but they need to look good. Whips always really need to look good, and I think there are a couple of very fundamental principles that can make your whips look better than before. So the main thing that I like to think of making your whips really, really stand out is messing with the depth or perception of someone with how you bring the whips back. So I'm about halfway to the whip here, I'm starting to close it, but then I bring it back and finish it. And that goes with pretty much anything, or with whichever way you are throwing the whip. As long as you are pulling it back, you get a huge trail. I don't have my lights on now, but you can probably guess, or if you do it yourself, you know that depth is a huge part. Also, really focus on the thumb a lot. It gives you a focal point upon which to place and bring your whips back and forward and forth and in and out of each other. And that's what I would really highly recommend, is focus on depth, focus on being able to complete a whip while pulling it back, and focus on the thumb, because if you get really close, it really emphasizes the finger roll movement. And then outside of that, what I like to do to change up a whip, or what I like to do to change up how a whip looks, is to move my arms a lot. And I mean this in the way that the whip motion is the exact same, and it's never going to change. It's always going to be this, or it's going to be this way or that way. But move your arms while you do it, and this is what I mean by that. This way, up and down, move one back while you move the other, bring it around, curl your wrists. But remember, the whip motion is never changing. It's always this. And I'll give you a very, very simple one. So, one whip this way, close, open, close, open, close. And this is just sending them back and forth if you want to do it really fast, if you want to do it really slow. And remember, just focus on creating the perfect shape with your whips. Make sure they're clean, and then move them. And this all has a foundation in how clean your whips are. And none of this is really going to apply if you haven't really just grinded your whips. If you haven't just sat down for hours and hours and hours, going super slow, spreading your fingers, cranking your wrists back as far as you can, focusing on depth, focusing on making sure your whips become such an integral part of your gloving arsenal that you don't even have to think about it. All you have to think about is moving them around, twirling them in and out of each other, crossing them, uncrossing them, and bringing them around and everything. So that's what I really like to focus on a lot. I like to focus on motion and sending them all over the place. I also like to stop them halfway sometimes. So if I'm doing that, and then I bang, and then I'll stop them, whip, 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 stop, and then send them the other way. So like this, duh. And if I'm coming from around, put it back, 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 put it back. Okay, so that's basically covering, you know how to whip, but you can't seem to get out of this or this. So what do? You move around. Move around. See, my whips, always the same, but my arms are traveling. And basically, this is your baseline. Move around, use the space, pull back, because the more that you can get out of this one lane, of perception between you and the the person receiving the light show is to abuse the space around you. Use it to its fullest potential. And then for actually incorporating different moves into whipping, or into changing your whips into different moves, it all comes down to finger rolling or more flow oriented moves rather than putting them into tech, because you can whip into tech. It is possible. My tech isn't the cleanest, but you can do it. But what I like to do, and I think this looks so much better, is whipping, 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 and then changing it into circle moves, into crossover waves, into normal finger rolls. That whole idea of making a whip as versatile as possible. And again, it all comes back to having clean whips. You can't do any of this if your whips or your finger rolls don't look good. Because if you do, it'll just look kind of like a mess rather than a smooth and fluid connection of flow-oriented moves. And I'll give you an example of that. So, whip, underarms. Sorry, whip, underarms. Keep one out here. And then start infinite finger rolling off of it. I'm under the assumption that if you're watching this, you know what to do. Infinite finger rolls, crossover waves, all that kind of stuff. So I'll do that again. Under, 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 stop it. Like that. And then you can also just do it into a circle move. Going up, down. Infinite, 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 crossover. And then the crossover, the one being crossed over, is coming down. And then whipping again. And again, it really comes down to having, and I can't stress this enough, it comes down to having such a firm understanding of solid finger rolls, having that muscle memory down 100%, and then transitioning that into more dynamic and creative whipping techniques. And that's basically, that's all I think I'm going to cover. If anyone watching this has any questions, please ask me, because I've always wanted to do more tutorials, and I've always wanted to try and teach what I have, because I feel like whipping is probably my strongest element of my gloving, and I love teaching it, and I love trying to help other people whip, because it's a huge part of a lot of people's show. It's a crowd pleaser. It's really enjoyable to watch. Trails are great, but a lot of the time people focus too much on the trails, or focus too much on speed, and abandon a good foundation. So please, by all means, let me know if you have any questions about any of the whips that I've done in the video, or any whips that you want to see me do. I'll also recommend that you go out and find other whip tutorials, because other people do have great tutorials. Some of the best whippers in the game: Flow, Materia, Slayer. I don't know any other whip tutorials off the top of my head. They do exist. But those three, Slayer covers more variations on whipping. Flow is a very much in-depth breakdown of whips, and Materia is more of a theory and changing someone's idea behind whipping and flailing. It's a much more abstract way of whipping, and it's gorgeous. So I'd highly recommend checking out those tutorials as well. I will probably just make another whip tutorial anyway that will cover more specific advanced techniques, like incorporating closed hand whipping and flailing while keeping one hand in and out and keeping them out of each other, alternating directional flails, all that fun stuff. But again, thanks so much for watching. Remember, practice your finger rolls non-stop. Do them slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. Over, back, different ways. Doing this, and then practice your whips. Spread your fingers, crank your wrists back all the way, and focus on the thumbs, focus on depth. And yep, that's all I got for today. Thanks so much for watching. This has been FFM Azure and my whip tutorial, and I hope you guys liked it.